6 new Hypercharges will be added to the game, making it a total of 30 Hypercharges overall, which means it's the perfect time to make a tier list so you can choose which brawlers to max out first. We'll be going from the worst ones to the best ones, starting up with Miko. I would say by far the worst Hypercharge is Miko's. His Hypercharge is not useful unless you super with it, and even the stun which it gives is pretty weak in my opinion, especially compared to other Hypercharges. Next up, we have Sprout, who I recently pushed on 35, and I can for sure say that the wall which makes damage is really a very skeptical Hypercharge, I would say, but it deals some damage to the Heist, so it has a great potential, but at the moment it's nowhere near as powerful as it should be. Jin's Hypercharge next, an extremely overrated one. The charge rate is slow, the ability is not that powerful, and I don't think people understand how useless the triple pull actually is. You might catch someone by accident, and that's when the real issue begins. Now, on the Brock's Hypercharge, I myself have to admit that I thought it's gonna be a very powerful one, but in reality it deals only a little bit more of damage, and yeah, the animation is really misleading, I would say, so he has to be just above Jin, in my opinion. I'm not gonna lie if I tell you that I didn't even know what was the purpose of Pearl's Hypercharge before making this video, but apparently it makes a super effect like spikes for 4.5 seconds. Not a very useful one, but her ability is still kinda weak, especially compared to the top places on this list. Next up, Tick's Hypercharge, which is extremely useless in my opinion, especially compared to other Hypercharges, which are pretty decent ones. The ability is not as strong, while the charge rate is pretty requiring, and you'll get it max 2 times per game, and yeah, it's really not that good. I'll go as far as placing Shelly's Hypercharge above it, because Shelly's Hypercharge makes her kinda unstoppable against tanks, and it's a pretty useful one if you use it correctly, so I would say it's low-key underrated, especially in Showdown, and it might not seem that powerful, but it gives just enough HP and damage for her to stay alive. Now, I might go very wrong with this one, but Nita's Hypercharge, I would place it just above Shelly's, because she gives only 2k HP to her burr, and obviously it becomes quicker with the Hypercharge, but it doesn't make that big of a change whatsoever. Many people will not understand me with this one, but I believe Belle's Hypercharge is better than Nita's, since Belle's Hypercharge is charging extremely quickly, and you can use it as far as 5 or 6 times per battle, so it's really underrated in my opinion, and it makes Belle actually pretty decent, so I have to place it just above Nita. I might not be the biggest fan of Charlie's Hypercharge, still it's kinda powerful one. The only unfortunate thing with it is that you cannot place the gadget at the same time, which makes it sometimes pretty annoying, I would say. What is not annoying though is Colt's Hypercharge, a very well balanced one. There is not much you can say about it besides that it's pretty good one, but at the same time it's not broken by any means. Primo's Hypercharge on place 18, which I thought is gonna be much more powerful, but in reality the ROI of the Hypercharge is not that high, so I cannot really say that it's that good, but at the same time it's pretty useful in some situations where you have to beat one single opponent. Just above Primo is Crow's Hypercharge, a pretty decent one, but once again the problem is the charge rate, otherwise it will be broken in my opinion, so unless you play Heist, I don't really recommend it. On the other side we have Bull's Hypercharge. The reason why I put it so low is a glitch which does not allow Bull to knock back enemies while he's in Hypercharge, and in some scenarios it plays a significant role of why he is unable to get the kill. Spike's Hypercharge might seem like an ordinary Hypercharge which increases the range of his super. At the same time, his charge rate of his Hypercharge is really quick, and for this reason, for example, he's better than Cole's Hypercharge. Next up is Rosa, which took me quite some time to think where to place her Hypercharge, since it's a pretty balanced one, but at the same time it can be very powerful in some situations. We have a ton of bushes where she can camp, but she needs a ton of circumstances to be perfect for her in order to realize the full potential, so I cannot place it higher than place 14 on the list. Maisie, a brawler which has fallen off since her super now requires 4 shots instead of 3. Back in the day the Hypercharge was insanely broken, you could get it literally every 40 seconds I would say. But now, unfortunately, when the super requires 4 shots, it's not nearly as powerful as it used to be. Edgar, another brawler on the list whose Hypercharge got nerfed since he cannot charge it through his gadget, which gives him his super. Even being 12 on the list is low-key high for him, but I still think he deserves it. Colette, a brawler who you see mostly on heist maps, which I unfortunately don't play, has a pretty powerful Hypercharge, especially when you do it on the safe. Otherwise, it's a decent one, but not as powerful unless you use her only in heist. Another new Hypercharge on the list, and it's Max Hypercharge, which seems extremely powerful since she can give her teammates speed no matter the distance, and also she gives a 25% buff to their super, so it's gonna be a pretty broken one in my opinion, and we'll see in the near future how strong it actually is. Just above Max, I must place Buzz, and his Hypercharge is the reason why he's back in the meta. It made him pretty powerful and fun to play with all the tricks you can do with him, so I believe more than deserved 9th place for Buzz today. Jackie with the most hated, I believe, Hypercharge, since it's pretty easy to charge it, it's pretty easy to use it, so every random really abuses it, which makes it extremely annoying, especially on the close maps when you face Jackie. It's just a nightmare, honestly. Cardelius would have a pretty balanced Hypercharge if he wasn't already good without it. The problem with him is that he's already overpowered, and in addition the Hypercharge makes him literally broken. For this reason only, he deserves to be that high on the list. Lou is also back in the meta with his Hypercharge, which makes an instant freeze, and it's pretty powerful, but at the same time it requires quite a time to charge it, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily broken, but it's definitely one of the strongest one in the game, which I would personally buy if I was a free-to-play. This might be a controversial one, but I believe Jessie deserves to be in the top 6 on the list today, since if you don't have a strong counter to her turret, it's gonna be literally the MVP, and by the time you break the Hypercharge turret, she might have another one charged already. Fang's Hypercharge was quite literally the best Hypercharge in the game by far. It was charging extremely quick, and the fact that you can go through walls with it, it's just broken, but now you can charge it only like twice per game, and it's much more balanced, especially when Fang got nerfed, so I simply cannot put it higher than 5th. Dynamic Hypercharge, one of my favorite ones, and as a Dynamic main I really appreciate that Supercell added it pretty early on in the game, so we can use it unlike other Hypercharges which have not been released yet. Bibi's Hypercharge literally made her from one of the worst brawlers to one of the best ones in game. Her charge rate is just insane. You can farm the Hypercharge in only 6 shots, which is extremely quick, and this made her by far one of the best assassins in the game, and it's a deserved 3rd place. 2nd place, and it's Sandy Hypercharge. Just look at it. First of all, it gives a stun to opponents, it gives 25% speed inside of the super, and I don't know how to even counter it. I cannot even imagine. It might be the most broken Hypercharge, but I placed it 2nd since we don't know yet, we haven't tried it out in ladder. We'll see in the near future as well. Deserved 1st place goes to Leon, and the Hypercharge is simply unstoppable. Yes, it's kinda hard to charge it, but Leon is in general a brawler with whom you can easily get supers back to back, which makes getting the Hypercharge pretty easy, and the power of it is just insane, so I think more than deserved 1st place. If you disagree with me, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm gonna read all of them, and see you tomorrow.